So moving on, we now can start with the rest of the linguistic errors. We'll move on to one of the more blatant errors that it's caught, and we can start over on this errors pane here. You can see that they're divided up, starting with linguistic errors at the top, and then unknown words, or mots inconnus, which we'll move on to when we're done with the first category. So on the left-hand side, you have the error, and on the right-hand column, you have the proposed correction. So when I click on this, it will highlight every example of this error throughout the text. So I've got about 5 examples of this error in my particular case. So the way to correct this is, you can just hover over this if you want to see what the problem is. You can expand this, and it says that this word is not accented properly. So to accept that, I can either hit the check mark here, the correction button, or I can just hit enter. And now it is corrected, and you can see in every place where this error comes up, it has a green underline to replace the red underline to show that the error has been corrected throughout. So now that I've corrected that one, it automatically moves on to the next one. So in this case, I have the word a, which is not accented when it should be. So if I hover over this and expand it, it's telling me not to confuse the a as a conjugation of avoir with the preposition a. So I just correct it the same way. I will hit the correction button this time, and it moves on to the next one automatically. I'll hit enter, and we just go on down, and we hit enter, and we just correct each one as it goes along. There I misconjugated the word montre. It should have been in plural, but I put it in singular, and we're back to the preposition a. And we just move along, and we look at the errors as we go down, and we correct what it's given us. So in this case, I put mauvais in the feminine when it should have been masculine to correspond with traitement. And we're almost done here. We just go on and on down the list. It's correcting the lack of accents. It's correcting my errors in conjugating verbs. And here it's giving me an alert that I've missed an accent again. And we're almost done here. And now répéter. And now we've finished all the linguistic errors, but as we'll see, there are going to be more. We've moved on now to unknown words. The reason why it's marking things like prévention as an unknown word is because I've forgotten the accent, so it's not recognizing it as a French word that's spelled correctly, but I've capitalized it, so it thinks that it's a proper noun, but it's not a proper noun that's in its dictionaries, so it doesn't really know what to do with it. So this is where I have to do some more revision, and I realize that I'm not supposed to have this word capitalized. In French, you only capitalize certain words in the names of organizations, like société, and proper nouns like l'Ontario. So I'm going to have to change this. I'm going to replace the capital letter with the lowercase letter. And now that I've done that, it's re-analyzing the sentence, and now it detects an error. So it should be prévention with an accent. So I can just correct that again, and it's fixed. And we're going to do the same thing with this word here, with cruauté. It should have a lowercase letter. And we're going to fix that, and the same thing happens. So it looks at the sentence again, and now it finds the error. So we're just going to do the same thing as before. We're going to correct that mistake. Now, it's moving on to the next one, but we're going to move a little further down because we found the same error I just corrected elsewhere. It's the same problem. The letter should be lowercase and not a capital. And so now that I've corrected it, it's looking at it again. It has found the error, and we are going to select that error, and then we're going to accept the correction. And the same thing we will do with the word cruauté again. And we have to wait a few seconds, but eventually it will catch up with us. And here it is again, and it highlights both instances. And I just hit enter, and it's corrected. So now I've ended up with another linguistic error. It's found that I incorrectly conjugated the verb avoir. It should be on with a T. So I'm going to fix that. And now we can move on to some ruptures. These are the problems that I've already addressed. There was one of them early on in the text, but now it's found another one. So the rupture here is des allégations que des chiens ont été maltraités. So it's having trouble interpreting this. And what I should have done here is replace que with selon lesquels. According to which. So now it has to look at the sentence again, and it will take a few seconds, but it has to analyze the sentence, and now I find that the error is gone. But of course I have another one, another rupture. Something else is wrong here. And the problem here is that I've forgotten the accent, so it doesn't recognize the word traiter. It doesn't realize that this is a conjugation of a verb. So I am going to have to insert the E with the accent. And again, we do have to wait a little while, but it will catch up with us. And now the problem is that I have my A again without the accent here. So it recognizes another rupture. So I'm going to have to change that. So I'm changing it now, and it will have to wait a little while. And now it's caught another linguistic error here. It's changed the error of interpretation with a linguistic error. So I'll just accept that. And once again here, I have the word that seems like it's a proper noun, and yet it's not in any of the dictionaries. Now, this is the same problem that I encounter up here. It's the fact that I've spelt this right, but I have a capital letter at the beginning, so it thinks that this should be in lowercase, which it should. That's why it's saying minuscule, lowercase. That's how it should be, so I'm going to change it. And there, the problem is fixed for now, and we'll see how it interprets it. And it doesn't see any problems there, so I'm going to change it again here. And we're going to see it revise the sentences again, and it doesn't find any problem. So now the only thing I have left is this one last rupture down here. Les allégations ont émergé. So it's having trouble interpreting the sentence because it finds that something is missing. So that, of course, is the word que. I should have included that. Après que les allégations ont émergé. And now everything is fine. All the errors are corrected. There are some alerts that it was giving me down here. That's the fact that boitin could be confused with another word, but I know that I have the right word here, so I can just ignore that. And that is it for now. There isn't anything else left that it's marking as an error in this category of la langue, so I can move on to typographie, which shows me all my typographical errors. Now this section is a little bit easier to go through because most of my errors are in one category, the apostrophe courbe. In French, there's a different apostrophe that's used than in English. It's a curved one. So I have the English apostrophe here. I need to replace it with the French one, so I just highlight that error right there, and I can just hit enter, and we have to wait a little while because there are a lot of corrections to be made at once, but it has corrected that. It has changed my straight apostrophe with the curved apostrophe in accord with the French writing conventions. And of course there's only one that I have left, and that is my extra space between words down here. So that's fairly easy to get rid of. just the same way as I get rid of all the other errors, and now you can see all my typographical errors are gone. Now I can move on to style. Now this one is a little bit more difficult. It does require some more thought on your part, some careful revision, and the main problem here is that I have words that are repeated. Now generally speaking, when you write in French, you want to avoid repetition as much as you can. That's certainly the case when you're writing something from scratch. But I have translated a newspaper article, and there are words that are used many times throughout. And when you're translating a document that uses specialized terminology, you might find that there's a bit more repetition, so you may have to be more resistant to Antidote's corrections here. So in this case, I have a newspaper article that has a caption for a picture included in it, and it essentially paraphrases some other parts of the text, so there is quite a bit of repetition here. So I don't necessarily have to accept all of Antidote's corrections here. You can see they're, of course, on the right-hand pane, and I can just go through this the same way that I would the other corrections. So here I'm going to ignore its corrections, and the way to ignore the corrections is to press this button here, not the plus one. That's to add something to the dictionary. So we're going to ignore the correction, and it will just move on. It talks a lot about dog sledding, so I do want to include that. These are just terms from the source text that I've translated from the original into French, and there's no compelling reason to change it. And since this does talk a lot about dogs as well, I'm going to keep the word chien, and it's moving on to vidéo. And in this case, I may end up ignoring most of these corrections. They do need to be included, especially the word protection. That's part of the name of an organization. So is animaux. Launched is only used a couple of times. A lot of these are only repeated once, so they're not really major problems. They're not major instances of excessive repetition. So enquête is used a few times. Cruauté is part of the organization name. I do have to keep it in there. Traitement I can keep. Société is also part of the organization name, and so is prévention. Dit, this is a verb that I only use a few times. It's a very common one throughout the source text, so I'm going to keep it. Allégation is important. Chien, of course, is another one. It's the whole article is about the dogs, so I need to keep that. Plainte is only repeated once. I can keep that. Couple is only repeated twice, which I can keep, and vidéo I do need to keep. So in this case, I am okay with the repetitions because it is a translation. So now I can look at tournure.